As you probably all know, Dune Part 2 is the follow-up to 2021's highly successful sci-fi epic Dune, directed by Denis Villenueve, and whereas that film focused on telling the first half of Frank Herbert's iconic novel, Dune Part 2 very simply adapts the second half of said book, because it's a big book and there is no way they could squeeze that into one film. A couple of days ago, I got the chance to see Dune Part 2 an entire week before it actually comes out in the UK on an IMAX screen nonetheless. So what this video is basically going to be is my spoiler-free thoughts on the film, what I think of it, why I think you guys should see it when it comes out on March 1st, and just generally how it compares to the first film, because I'm telling you now, Dune Part 2 has the potential to be the film of the year. Like, I will be very surprised if something comes along and overtakes it, but as it stands, and I know we're only in February at this point, but this might be the best film of 2024. Now, for a little bit of context, I absolutely love Denis Villeneuve as a director. I've loved almost everything I've seen of his, whether it's Sicario, Prisoners, Blade Runner 2049, the incredibly underrated Incendie. Everything that guy does is gold. Like, there is not a single film of his that I've seen where I've gone, that's crap. Every film of his I've loved in some shape or form. And Dune, released back in 2021, was one of those films that just blew me away the moment I saw it in the cinema. It was one of those rare films where every single scene kind of outdid the last one, and every element of that film just immediately kind of smacks you around the face, whether it's the cinematography, the sound design, the score, the acting, everything about that first film was incredible. My one minor little issue, and a lot of people have said this, is that it's a lot of setup and it's basically just setting the scene for all the shit that goes down in part 2. And to an extent, I kind of get that, and the way part 1 ends does feel a little anticlimactic, again, because it is only telling half of a story. That story that it does tell in that first half is still incredibly well done and is still a riveting story. But there is that tiny little thing in the back of your head while you're watching part 1 where you know you're not going to get the whole thing. You're not going to get the whole story immediately because this is just the first half of that. Which is where Dune Part 2 comes in. Because the original film did all the heavy work in terms of setting up the world and the characters and establishing the world in which these events take place in, Dune Part 2 can basically just take everything from the first film and just run with it and do whatever the hell it wants, because all that setup has been done in the first movie. And this film does that in such a riveting way, because Dune Part 2 picks up pretty much where the first film left off and then just kind of keeps going. The film very rarely lets up and doesn't really have much downtime, and even when there is some downtime, there is always important character stuff being discussed or being developed, and I think that's one aspect where this film outshines the first. The first film is very good in almost every way, but I can completely understand why some people were a little bit hollow towards the things that were happening and some of the characters in that first film, because it's a lot of stuff happening but you don't really get a chance to sit down and connect with those characters. Well, in Dune Part 2 you get a lot more of that, and it's all done perfectly well with some incredibly tight pacing. The film is 2 hours 46 minutes, yet the whole film kind of flies by. Even some of the quieter and tender moments are treated with a little bit of urgency, which I think, again, really helps, because the pacing is improved in Part 2. I also think the writing is heavily improved as well, because Part 2 focuses very heavily on Paul trying to figure out what his place is within everything that's going on. It allows more time to delve into his character and also to just develop those relationships he has with the other characters, and I think this film does that so incredibly well. Anyone that thought that the characters were a bit hollow in the first film, thankfully that's something that is rectified in this second film, because you just get to spend more time with these characters, and the writing definitely helps flesh them out and just explore this world that they inhabit and how they operate within the world as well. Whilst we're talking about characters, we might as well mention performances. Everyone in this film is giving 110%, whether it's Javier Bardem, or Timothée Chalamet, or Zendaya, or Rebecca Ferguson. Every single person in this film knows the assignment and is committing to it in every single way. And even some of the new additions, like Florence Pugh, who doesn't necessarily get to do much, but every scene that she is in feels important and she understands that. You have Léa Seydoux, who is really only in one scene, but again, she is very good in that scene that she's in. However, in my opinion, the best new addition to the cast is Austin Butler as Fade Rotha Harkonnen. My god, this guy is unhinged. He is just an absolute maniac of a character. For those of you that haven't read the book or haven't seen David Lynch's 1984 film, Fade Rotha Harkonnen is this psychotic monster of a character. He just craves blood and a fight 24/7. If a soldier screws up just once, he will kill them on the spot. That's how unhinged this character is. Now, one of my favourite aspects of the original film was the scale of everything. From the score, to the cinematography, to the effects, to the soundtrack, everything just felt larger than life and ginormous. And if you thought that was the case with the first film, Dune Part 2 takes that and just increases it somehow even more. Again, having seen this in IMAX, there were honestly some moments where the sound design and score alone were just kind of smacking me around the face because of how loud and intense they can be. And then there are other moments where the visuals alone are just so massive and in your face that is the thing that is just overwhelming you. And in some films, it can be a bit too much, but like with the first movie, Dune Part 2 thankfully manages to find just the right balance of showing you these giant things and dousing you in spectacle and scale, but also finding, again, like I said earlier, those quieter moments that again can feel rather larger than life and grand. Even some of these small conversational moments between Chani and Paul just sitting on the sand dunes can seem like the most epic thing in the world purely because of how they're shot and how the score just backs everything up. And it's just a testament to, again, everybody working on this film understanding what it is they're doing. And again, Greg Fraser's immaculate cinematography just makes everything in the film feel real and tangible, yet incredibly larger than life in every single way. Honestly, there are some shots in Dune Part 2 that are just going to stay with me for a long time, purely because of how in awe I was of that specific shot. That's how good his cinematography is. And with films like this and The Creator and The Batman and even Rogue One, he's proving himself to be one of the best cinematographers probably working today. Also, Dune Part 2 does something that I really appreciated about the first film, which is that you will just see these really weird unexplained things either in the forefront or the background of a scene, and it will never get explained, but it's just there. And I really liked these touches in the first film because it really showed Denis Villeneuve's attention to detail in the world building and his commitment to trying to tell Frank Herbert's vision in the most well-realised way possible. For example, there is a scene in the first film where Baron Harkonnen is just talking to someone and there is this weird spider-like creature just in the room, and it's like his pet, but it's never explained, it's never brought up again, it's just there for one scene. It creeps you the fuck out when you see it, and again, it's just there. And there are similar choices throughout Dune Part 2 which feel very reminiscent of that. Someone might be wearing a very odd item of clothing, or there might be just this weird creature just off to the side, or this thing might just happen in the background and you'll get no explanation for it, and it will never be the focus of the scene, but you'll clock it in your peripheral vision and you'll be like, what is that? That is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Can someone please explain it? But these little attentions to detail really help build the world. They're small, minor little things that no one really ever pays attention to, or even if you do notice it, you just acknowledge it's there and then move on. But again, it's just something that I really appreciate about this film and the first film, and I'm glad they kind of stuck to their guns with those sorts of things, because I just really appreciate little things like that, and I'm glad that they keep them in. The action set pieces as well in this film are honestly incredible. Whereas the first film had some action and it was, again, beautifully well realised, here there is a lot more action, and especially when you get to the final act, it has some of the best grand scale battle sequences I've ever seen. Like, again, I know I've said this multiple times before already in this video, but the scale alone is jaw-dropping. Like, I cannot begin to fathom how they went about doing this and realizing the true enormity of what they're trying to put up on the screen. But they did a brilliant job, because it just looks so... it's just so good. It's just so good. This is half the issue when trying to do a form of review for Dune Part 2, because this is half the reason I didn't make a video of the original Dune when it came out, because the film is just so incredibly good, yet it's hard to sum up in a nutshell why it's good. You just love it so much. I had that with Dune Part 1, and I'm kind of having the same thing with Dune Part 2. I just love it for what it is, yet trying to pinpoint specific things that I love about the film becomes very hard, because trying to put it into words can be rather tricky when it's a film of this scale. But anyway, if you weren't already excited for Dune Part 2, then you really should be, because it might just be the film of the year. I know we're only in February, but it's going to be very hard for something to come along and beat this, because it is that good. It's got incredible cinematography. Hans Zimmer's score is incredible, and again, there are moments where it just kind of grabs you by the neck and throttles you like it did in the first film, and with a film like this you kind of want the score to do that. The performances are phenomenal across the board. The storytelling and pacing is so much better than it was in the first, and it's just an incredible film. So everyone watching this video, do yourself a favour, when the film comes out on March 1st in the UK, get yourself a ticket, see it on the biggest screen possible, because you will not be disappointed. So guys, those were my thoughts on Dune Part 2. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments how excited you are for this film and what your thoughts are on the first film as well. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.